And hello and welcome. My name is Martin, and today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating our second enemy character, which is going to be a homing missile. Now, there's going to be a lot of similarity between the homing missile and the S-mine, being that we want to keep basically the same code that we have, which was the explosion. We want that to be generated again because a homing missile, when it hits something, would explode. The difference, obviously, is that a stationary mine is stationary. It stays in one place where the homing missile would be able to move. Also, the homing missile has to home. It has to get to something that it's been targeting to. So we're going to set up those conditions in this next tutorial. And well, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we want to do is we're actually going to make a copy of this right here. So we're going to right click on them and we're going to go to duplicate. And instead of just naming it the same thing with a 3, we're actually going to call this H missile. And we're calling it that because it's homing missile, right? So we're going to create one and call it homing missile. Now, if we double click into the homing missile, we have the code there. Pretty much everything's there. We don't really need to do anything except for we're going to have to do two things. One we can't do right now because we don't have the AI created. But one we can. And the one that we can do right now is reset this. If you'll notice, this still says S-mine explosion 1. And you can't have two variables with the same name, unfortunately. So we are going to have to make this different. So I'm going to go ahead and destroy or delete. I'm just going to select and delete everything that has to do with that. And at the same time, I could probably go over here and underneath variables and delete. Yeah, because it's a duplicate, so it'll still be in the other one. So we can delete it from here. So let's right click on this and say delete, not duplicate. Delete. Delete. And if we go to S-mine 2, you'll see that it's still there, right? Because these are two different things now because they've been duplicated. All right, so now that we have that, we obviously need to make this into a variable. So we're going to click drag out again. We're going to promote to variable. And we're going to make sure that both of those attached, and we're going to give this one a unique name, correct? So let's go ahead and click here, and let's call this H missile underscore explosion, and we'll put a 1 there. Okay, so now we have that, and just like we did with the other one, we're going to, with this one selected, that'll give us the option to create events for this variable. And let's click on the on destroyed. And what that'll do is it'll create a new event. And all I did was zoom out because I like to put it up here because it's closer to the area that it's talking about. And what we need to do now is basically this is an event, right? So just like this red one was an event where it was saying when this happens in the game, then do this. So what we're saying is when this thing becomes a variable, we want it to do this. We want it to destroy. On destroyed, we want this thing to be to go away. So when this thing gets destroyed, we're going to click off of here and we're going to type in destroy actor. Okay. Destroy actor, and we want to make sure that the target for the destroy actor is the destroyed actor, which in this case would be the H missile explosion 1. And what this is going to do now is it's going to do just the same thing that it did for us in the stationary mine. It's going to ensure that this element that was created will now go away when this object is destroyed, right? So we've made that change. We're going to go ahead and compile and save. Okay, now the next thing we need to do is if this is the body, we need to create the brain. We need to give it an AI, a set of instructions to follow, right? And that's all an AI is. It's going to appear like artificial intelligence, but really all it means is a set of instructions that the thing is going to follow, right? So to do that, we need to right click in this area here. We're going to scroll up again to blueprint class. So this is another type of blueprint. So we're going to click there. And this time it's not one of the presets up here at the top. So it's not a super common one, but we can look it up. So down here, like I said, there could be hundreds Yeah, 650 different types of items that are down there. So to look for it would be crazy. So we're just going to type in AI. And this is what we're looking for, is the AI controller. So this is going to control, this is going to be the instructions for AI, right? So we're going to select that and click select. Here we're going to call it the H missile underscore AI. H missile underscore AI. Okay. And it's really important to name things because you might have multiple AIs later and then you don't know which one belongs to which, and it's much better if you know this. All right, so once we've done that, the next thing that we need to do is we need to double click and open up the AI. And in doing so, we're going to start writing a couple of pieces of code in here. So the first thing is that in the viewport, we don't need anything. There's not anything that needs to be there because this is going to be invisible. It's going to be what the H missile listens to. So there is no need for anything in the viewport. Again, nothing in the construction script for now. And what we are going to do is go to the event graph. Now in the event graph, we have two options. We have the event begin play and the event tick. Now the event tick is basically what we're going to do with the event begin play is basically create a tick that is just not as expensive, and that we can also attach something like well, no, I guess we could also attach an AI move to the tick, but we don't want to do it to the tick because it'd be too fast, and this is very expensive. The more ticks you have running on the page, the more your processing power is, more computer processing power you're going to need for that. So the best thing to do is to avoid ticks if possible. Only use them when you really need them, or there's no other way, or it's the best method for what you're trying to do. So what that's going to leave us with is the event begin play. Now what this basically means is when we push play in the game, what happens? This happens, right? So again, just like we did off of the inside the stationary mine, we're going to click and drag off of the execute. And what we're looking for here is set timer by function name. So set, just right click and find it. Okay, so there it is right there, set timer by function name. And we'll see that we now get a blue box with a little F in the front of it. So that lets us know that this is a function. And from there we have the execute from here that we can go into the execute. That now activates this because now there is something attached to this. Before it was just sitting there blank. And basically what we're going to tell it is that every second, and we're going to loop it so that it keeps going back around, we want it to check for this function. And if this function is true, then we want you to make sure that whatever function's attached to this, that you make that happen, right? So at the beginning of play, if this is true, then we want you to we basically want you to move towards the player essentially. So let's go ahead and get this filled out. So the first thing that we need is on the event begin play, we need a function name. So we need to find another, is it by function? Yeah, we need to create a custom function or a custom event, which is then going to go here inside the function name, right? So let's go ahead and create that. So all the other ones that we've created up until this point have been ones that we have found. This will be the first time that we create a custom one with its own name. So we're going to type in custom event. And you see that this is the one that we're looking for. We know that it's an event because it's got that little icon in front of it that looks like a little sideways diamond with a little triangle in there. So we're going to go ahead and select that. And you see now that we get a box and we can put our name in it. It is also red and it says custom event. So we know that it is looking for a piece of data from the game to trigger this. So let's go follow player. So this is what we're going to call it. So we've just created an event which is going to be follow the player, right? So we're going to call it follow player, and we're going to take that name exactly the same way and type it in here. No extra spaces, and make sure all the capitalization and everything is exactly the same. Make sure you don't add that extra space at the end, like push space bar or something at the end, because then they won't match. Okay, so now we're saying is at the beginning of this level, go ahead and set a timer. This is the function that we want you to comply. This is how many times, this is when we want you, or after this starts, this is how long we want this thing to be checking for, and then we want it to loop. So basically now what we're saying with the loop is that we want you to, at the beginning of the game, check this thing once per second, right? So every second, go and check and see if this is happening. Go and see if this is happening. Go and see if this is happening. If it is, well, then we will get this condition down here. It will then go to the next part, which would be follow the player. So down here, what we want to do is we want to click and drag out, and we want to type in, because we need to set up some type of moving, right? Because right now this object is movable, but unless gravity is affecting it, it doesn't move on its own. It doesn't move towards, laterally, or anything like that. So we need to create what's called an AI move to. It's a function. So we'll type in AI move to, and we will connect that to the follow player. Now from here, we need to give it two pieces of information. We need to tell it what is going to move, which one of the pawns, and what it's going to move towards. What is the target actor, right? So for the first one, for the pawn, we're going to type in get controlled pawn. Okay. And what this is going to do is whatever pawn is being controlled by this AI, the target being self. That's how we know that it's reflective to itself. It's this AI. Anything that is being controlled by this AI will then, if these conditions are met, will then follow the first person player. Well, not yet, because we haven't given it the target actor. So that's what we need to do now. Is we need to put here get player character. Oops, I think I misspelled player. Player character. Now, remember how earlier I was saying pawns and characters? Well, there we go. So right now we're saying get player character, and the player that's being indexed is 0. 0 is the first person. That's us. That's whoever's playing the game, right? That's the player 1 is actually player 0, because the computer's numbers start with 0 again. So okay, so at this point, we've written everything that we need. What we're basically saying again is when the game starts, once a second, check to see, and keep doing it, and see if this condition is correct. If that condition is true, then you are going to tell the pawn that's being controlled by this AI to move to the target actor, right? So let's go ahead and hit compile and save. And the next thing we need to do is go back to the missile, the actual missile, and there's two things that I want to do. The first thing I need to do is click on self, and underneath pawn, notice that it says AI controller class. Well, that's sort of what we just created, right? We created an AI controller. So let's go ahead and click and see if we can find ours. And there it is, AI missile underscore AI. Oh, I have two because I created, so the one we just created is the smaller one. And did I do that the right way? Did I actually create that in a pawn or in an AI controller? No, I've created it in an AI controller. Okay, it just looked weird. Let's go back here. Let's click in there. So that now is HMissile underscore AI. So now this thing knows that it's being controlled by that set of instructions. So the next thing I want to do is I want to make this thing look a little bit different, because right now it still sort of looks like the other thing. I suppose one of the things I could do maybe is, let me see if I can fix the size issue with this thing. So it only has scale. It does not have the mesh. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to put this back to 0. Or I'm sorry, to 1. I'm going to find a different mesh. Let me see if I can find... Who knows? Maybe I have a missile. Nope. So I think earlier what I did was I found a pencil. And I used the pencil because the pencil itself had a let's select. Come on now. Okay. So let's zoom in. And that's kind of cool. It's actually using the leftover material from that thing, and that kind of looks like a little bit of a camouflage kind of look. Interesting. Now, what I did in class was I actually put a particle system on the back of this to make it look sort of like a flame or a fire was actually on the back side of it. So to do that, what we'll do is we'll add another component. So I'm going to click on Add Component, and what I'm looking for is particle. So I'm going to type in particle, so P-A-R-T, and we'll see there that we get a particle system. So I'm going to select particle system, not the Niagara, but the particle system. And in that particle system, underneath templates, I'm going to select, let's say flame. I think that's the one that I found that looked pretty good. Oh, no flame, huh? So there's flare, there's candle flame. Okay, let's make that a little bit bigger. And let's rotate it. And let's reposition it. I can just select that and move it back. Okay, there we go. So now we've got a unique mesh material deal. It sort of is going to look like a homing missile. It's got some neat little particle system on the back of it. And it's being controlled now by the proper AI. So with all those changes made, we're going to go ahead and hit compile and save. Okay, so at this point we're ready to go ahead and put one of these out on the floor, and I've created its own little area for it, and I've actually gone in there and already called it pawn with AI, the fact that it is going to be movable, and then I'm going to jot down all the information for that in a second. So let's go ahead and grab one of these and put them out on the floor. And let me have them pointing in the right direction. So that way at least they come towards us. And let's make at least one or two of these things. So we'll go Alt or Control C, Control V, and then grab one of them and move them. And let's do one more. Control C, Control V. I think I made 2 floors just now. Yep. Alright, so we got 3 little missiles. They are ready to be fired at us, but we're still missing one thing. And the other thing I also want to check is the explosion, because we haven't actually checked that yet. So let's go and push play. And I should walk up to them and nothing should happen. And I'll explain that in a moment. So the first thing I want to do is see if I can shoot one, and it does explode. Ah, there we go. So we have a little bit of a mistake there, right? The fire is still showing. So let's, the first one we shot at, this one we'll walk into. There we go, right? So we're still seeing the fires left, right? Now, the reason for that is because when we made... when we went to the event graph, we added a particle system that is now not part of that destroy component, right? So the fact that it's not there means that it gets left behind when everything else goes away. So we want to go ahead and grab a copy of that. So I'm just clicking, left clicking, and dragging it out onto the floor or onto the blueprint. And then from there, I'm just going to attach it to the target with everything else, right? So now those should also go away. So let's hit compile and save, and let's close this, and let's see if that now happens. So let's push play. Okay, so they're still not moving towards us. I can shoot one, and the fire is gone, right? So let's run into the other one. Boom. Nothing left. We'll shoot this one. Nothing left. And if I shoot into those areas, we see we don't get any additional explosions, right? Okay, so now the last thing that we need to, whoops. The last thing we need to do is make these things actually move. So to do that, there's actually two things that we need to do. The first thing is we need to create some type of motion, some way for these things to move, some kind of things like speed and direction and all those things, right? So we have to give it something like that. And then we also have to define an area that these things are going to operate in, because otherwise they would go anywhere. So you have to control them. So let's do the first thing. So the first thing is we need to go back to HMissile, and we actually have to add to this what's called a floating pawn movement, right? So if I go back to add component and I scroll down, you'll see, oops. You see when we go into movement, there it is, floating pawn, projectile, that's what's in our the things that we're shooting. Rotating movement, right? So if you want to create like a rotation in something, you can just put a rotating movement on there. So with this thing, what we're looking for is a floating pawn movement, right? Now once we've got that there, if we click on it, we'll see that we got now what? Max speed. We have acceleration. We have deceleration. So now we have those things that we were looking for, which is how is this thing going to move, right? So at 1200, well, it's a missile, so let's say we'll let it go pretty fast, right, at 1200. So let's go ahead and hit compile and save, right? And now that we have told the missile how to move, we need to define an area for it to move in. Now this is going to lead into a lot of what we're doing with lab number 6, which is going to be specifically navigation areas, right? So creating nav mesh areas. So to do that, since it's an area, we're going to go to volumes, and inside of volumes, we're going to see one that is called navigation mesh bounds volume. So what that means is area that can be moved around, area being volume, navigation meaning movement, bounds meaning inside that area, movement will be allowed, right? Is basically what we're saying. So if we grab one of these and put them out on the floor, if this is the first time you've done it and you don't see that green when it shows up, hit the letter P on your keyboard. Okay? And if you were to go, I believe it's to the view menu. I forget exactly where the shortcut is, but I remember it's the letter P. And so all you got to do is hit the letter P, and if this guy, well, this has to be selected, and if you hit the letter P, you should see that green. Now that green will only be there if this box is touching a surface. So if we have this suspended in air, there is no navigation area because there's nothing for any, I mean, you can't walk on air, right? So this does need to be touching the floor. That's the way this thing works. So we'll push it back into the floor. We'll see that it turns green. And then at this point, we're just going to scale this thing up. So since it's a volume, you should have brush settings. And I like using this better. It doesn't need to be super tall. But let's widen it out. And now let's, well, make it longer and then widen it out. Okay, and the only other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make this thing a little bit longer just so that it matches the area here. I believe that's on the Y. Okay, and all I did, the only reason I did that is so then that way we know where the area is, and we know that as soon as I get on that area, I should start being attacked. Now the other thing that I also want to do is, you see how these things have like a little border that's around the outside of them? That's good. That means they're actually they're part of the mesh. If for whatever reason this thing is not inside the mesh, you will end up, or yeah, see right there, it's not, at this point it may or may not work. I like it better when these things, you can see like an outline in them. And then that makes me feel better that even though these are at different heights, they're still going to run along the bottom of this thing. Okay, so at this point, everything should be working. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a save all here. I'm going to do a save all here. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I've created a navigation mesh. And so I want those settings to take effect. Now, there may be one, if this doesn't work, that we might need to build the navigation or build the what's called paths, and this would be considered a path that these objects can follow. So if it for whatever reason doesn't work, then we'll build paths, and then we'll go in and test it. Okay, so we'll stand back here, we'll walk in, and yep, everybody came at me and they all exploded. And they are all now gone. Okay, so let's do that one more time. And this time, let's see if... Okay, so let's just double check that one more time. Let's push play and... Oh, I changed the speed. I made them 200 just so that we could actually see them coming at us. Okay, nice. And like I said, they're all gone now. Okay, so at that point, the only thing I would want you to do is obviously come up here, show me, fill in the information for all the settings with well, I misspelled actor up there. Actor with pawn and AI, the fact that they're movable, the fact that physics is enabled on them, the fact that the collision presets are, you know, whatever they are, collision enables, you know, query and physics and all that. And the object type would be whatever you've labeled it, probably a world static, and then how it deals with other world statics and other pawns, which is us, right? Whether it's blocking them or ignoring them or overlapping with them, right? So okay, so now we have created our homing missile and our stationary mines, and we are ready to move on to understanding better navigation systems, because we can see how that is going to give us more possibilities, right? So I hope you've enjoyed the video and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.